1. So a little bit of background for me. I'm a fraud investigator at a company who specializes in small businesses and contracting with larger companies in the northern South Carolina and southern North Carolina area. I'm a trained forensic accountant, however. Mostly I investigate arson and/or property damage. Usually the people we're investigating aren't the type for embezzlement or laundering, so my job generally consists of going with another investigator to a burned-down house or business, and nodding and agreeing with everything they say, as I'm not trained for arson. That being said, I spend most of my time doing paperwork in the office, as we're in a pretty small area. Though with Hurricane Florence finally wrapping up, I'm sure my workload is going to increase tenfold in the days to come. So one of our main things to make sure that we don't lie or cheat during investigations is that as soon as we open an investigation, we are required to take copious notes and even sometimes record conversations. This is all with a grain of salt, as we're not going to record a woman crying incoherently. However, we just got a new investigator who was only brought in because he was a friend of one of the current partners who set up the group. We'll call him Dean. Only problem was, the other partners who headed the group were not completely convinced that he was the investigator the other partner said he was. So he was under a watchful eye. He was a good guy, and a hell of an accountant, so I liked him, but he also looked up to us for help. Here's where the big bad of the story comes in. We'll call him Mac. Mac had been with the firm for almost 15 years at this point, and saw himself as a bit of a badass. He would never follow rules, harass our female co-workers, and oftentimes come into work drunk. Him and I never worked together, but everyone called him the Private Eye, because that's what he saw himself as. At some point in the summer, Dean, Mac, and I were paired up to investigate a report of embezzlement at a rather large chain in the area. Dean and I drove together, and Mac drove alone. We get to the chain, and we see Mac has already gotten there, and immediately starts yelling at Dean for not taking notes already, as the investigation has started. Dean shies away, and Mac gives me a dirty look, but he knows that I can't be bullied, so he leaves me be. Mac explains to Dean that everything must be recorded, no matter what. Me, feeling bad for Dean, tells him that I'll take all the notes, while Dean can record all the interviews, so on, so forth. We get there and talk to the manager, who was the one who noticed the problem in the first place. And I ask to take a look at the books to see if I can find any discrepancies, so on, so forth. Dean already has his microphone on, and I'm taking notes. When Mac tells me to "Fuck off, cunt. That's my job," I know better than to argue, so I just nod. Dean goes with Mac while I interview the manager, and then talk to a couple of the other workers to take up time. Mac and Dean come back from getting the accounting books, and Dean looks like he's about to break down. We wrap up and leave, and Dean and I get back in the car where he explains he was verbally abused by Mac the entire time. We get back to the partnership, and I ask if Dean had his recorder on the entire time. He said yes. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. The next day I decide to go over the books again with Mac before continuing the investigation. I invite Dean in to see how we do things, so on and so forth, and ask if I should keep on taking notes. Mac says, and I quote, "Yes, everything, so that we can give it all to the partners for review." So, I take notes on everything. Everything. Every word spoke, every hand movement, every comment Mac made to us or anyone else, every number, every page turn, so on, so forth. When we went back to the business, I did the same. By the end of the week, I had a small novel worth of notes, and Dean had enough recordings of voices that he could voice act 7 seasons of a show. All of this included lewd comments, racial slurs, drinking on the job, bragging about stealing cigarettes when he was 13, berating his wife on the phone, telling Dean to suck his dick, telling me to fuck a duck, and so on, so forth. From Mac. We pass the case on to our lawyers and, as a result, have to turn in our notes to the partners. Imagine the surprise on their face when I come in with 76 pages, front and back, of notes, and Dean walks in with a USB stick full of 5 days worth of Mac being a dick. And everyone else being generally pleasant. The conversation was pretty much as follows. "I see you've been taking notes." "Yes, I have. Mac, being the senior member of the group, told us to take notes on everything." "Well, yes, that is our policy. I've never seen this type of output, though." "Well, that USB stick has 5 days worth of conversation, and the papers have the same." "Well, could you give us the minimum we need?" "I think you should go through it all, if not at least read the first couple pages, and listen to a little bit of it. The most important stuff has stars at the top of the page." "All right. Thank you." I left the office and took the weekend off. Come Monday morning, I was called into the business office where the partners were. I was sat down and basically told that while they appreciate my commitment to my job, and trying to guide Dean in the right direction, the amount of information we had compiled was unnecessary but eye-opening in how employees were working with one another. They thanked me for the good work, but lightly warned me that another note compilation would have more backlash. The next day, I found an email had gone out that employees are to work together in a friendly environment, as well as an empty desk, and a senior investigator position opening. Wherever you are, Mac, I hope you found that private eye job you were looking for. 2. Let me just say, I worked in restaurants on and off for a total of about 5 years. I hate restaurant work, so I hope I never have to work in another kitchen. My second job was at a quick-serve burger joint, ran by a corporation for a popular chef. We'll call him Fobby Blay. So Fobby Blay's quick-serve burger joint had just expanded to this mall. I left my first job to work there because the pay was ever so slightly better. The general manager, who we'll just call manager, seemed to be a dunce from the start. Not to insult his intelligence, but I could tell from his interview he was not the brightest bulb on the chandelier. Manager seemed to be a hands-off guy. When he was there, he was in the office with his vape for the day. When he wasn't, the place ran pretty smooth. To the somewhat malicious compliance. We had an issue with the fry oil. The fryolators, too, needed to be cleaned, and the oil tank we had out back was full because the guys that come and empty it did not come the night before. We're prepping for lunch rush, and we need to change this oil. It's a Friday, and we're most busy during the weekend. Originally, the manager decides we must use this oil because the kitchen manager is not there, who was a great guy. We have to listen to manager. So we heat the oil. Manager comes back out from the office while we continue prepping. Puts the metal cleaner, it's like a webbed spatula, to get out any debris that fell into the oil and is sitting in the bottom or floating in the oil. Now, clean oil would be yellow but clear. So, you could see the bottom of the fryolator. Old oil turns very dark brown because you've been cooking in it. We knew before turning on these fryolators that this oil was very old and would be too dark to cook in, resulting in ugly and poor-tasting fries. We warned manager of this before heating the oil. Manager now says, "This oil is really too dark to cook in. We need to think of a way to get clean oil in this." We start brainstorming. We could use one fryolator and use our filtering machine to put one of the fryolator's oil into the other, and just clean and use one for the day until we could dump the old oil. It would slow our times, but would result in happy customers who aren't getting disgusting French fries. Manager doesn't like it. We could let the old oil sit in our filter machine because it could hold the oil, though it would end up being a pain to clear out after. Manager doesn't like that either. We happened to serve quarter-slice kosher dill pickles with the burgers. We had a bunch of empty buckets. Now, with these plastic buckets, they can withstand some heat, but the oil we use is at 425 degrees, and because the oil was already heated to roughly this temperature, we could absolutely not put hot oil into these plastic bins at this time. Manager thought this was a genius idea. Our cooks and I all said no, but Manager is determined. This is the right move. Unfortunately, I am the closest to him. Manager tells me to grab some buckets. I asked him if he was sure, because this would melt the buckets and leave us with a mess all over the floor. Manager is still determined this is the right move. Everyone else steps back and goes back to prep, as manager seems to be tasking me with assisting him. I tell manager I absolutely under no circumstance will be doing this. Manager says, "Fine, I'll empty it. Just get me the buckets." I do so. My co-workers and I look on in amazement as he pours burning hot oil into one of these buckets. I stand close, but far enough that when the plastic starts burning, I'm not stepping in burning hot oil. So manager fills one bucket. No problem. He seems satisfied. "Grab me another," he says. I comply. And he starts to fill bucket 2. A hole around the size of a dollar coin in the US starts to form and lighten in color on the side of bucket 1. The oil is burning a literal hole in the side of the bucket, and before you know it, there is a steady stream of hot oil pouring out onto the kitchen floor. The kitchen staff looks on in bewilderment, and an "I told you so" laugh comes from a couple members. The manager burned his hands trying to clean it up, and I spent the majority of the next 20 minutes helping him clean up. We used all the rags the kitchen had. Needless to say, fries were not good that morning, and were also very slow because he half-emptied one fryer later, rendering it useless for the entirety of the day. Kitchen manager and the kitchen staff all had a laugh about this, and manager had burned hands for a few days, and had to replace his sneakers, the bottoms melted in the oil, all because he was so certain he was correct. 3. In the fast food business you have two kinds of old ladies. The ones that tip $5 and the ones that rip $5 out of your tip jar when they hear that you don't carry chicken at your restaurant. I recently got to deal with the second one. I work at a restaurant called Jimmy John's, which, if you don't have one, we serve sandwiches with your choice of 6 meats: ham, roast beef, tuna, turkey, capicola, and salami. These also come with your choice of vegetable, but never once have we sold chicken. So anyways, it was late into my second shift working in shop, and we were short-staffed and it had been a long day already, and I was not in the mood to deal with a crabby customer. Sadly, there was a crabby customer who had it coming for me. A privileged old jaunted her way through the door and casually strode up to the registers, and proceeded to look at the menu for at least 5 minutes, letting a decent line build up behind her before she decided to order. After taking her sweet time at the menu, she decided to make up a sandwich using none of the ingredients we had to offer. She requested a chicken unwich lettuce wrap, with olive sprouts and Newman's Own vinaigrette. I then told her we don't carry those ingredients, and the sprouts were a one-time thing that we served a couple of years ago. She snarkily hit me with, "I've ordered this in the past," then explained to me that it was at this exact location yesterday it was ordered. I was baffled as to how any of this was possible, and yet I wanted to provide the best customer service possible, and politely told her that we don't carry any of those, and again, the sprouts were only something we carried a couple years ago. To which she responded with a look similar to that of which a cat might give you if you scared or splashed with water, and revolted at the fact that I was telling her no. She demanded to speak with my manager, knowing I had her in a box. Thankfully, I got to mess around with her a little bit, since, as mentioned before, we were short-staffed and my manager had gone out to take a delivery and left me in charge. So I did a quick 180, shouted to the kitchen for the manager to come out to the register, and then did another 180 and spoke softly to her. "Manager present? What seems to be the problem?" To this, it was almost as if I had, instead of spritzing water at a cat with a squirt bottle, had hit her with a whole bucket of water, and she was so hot with rage that it fizzled off with steam. At this point, the line was approaching the door, and I had become worried that customers would start walking out soon. So I assigned a different in-shopper to the register, while I stepped aside to help this lady work out her problem. I was pretty pissed off and didn't care at this point and really just wanted to stick around for the ride. She was blowing off steam from my water bucket I threw at her. and feistily clawed at me with another smart remark. "Can I speak to the owner?" As with most restaurants, you aren't supposed to give out the owner's number, so I instead gave her the number of the store, and she bit the bait and called. The phone started ringing, and I quickly spun around to answer it, and I picked up the phone with the usual, "Jimmy Johns, how can we help you?" I was answered with a hiss from the line, and from behind me as she quickly slapped her phone closed and stormed into the kitchen. Usually this behavior is considered threatening, and I could have thrown her out of the restaurant. But she was an old lady, what's the worst she's going to do? She spat out a series of almost incoherent words like it hurt to speak them.
"Take me back to the fridge and show me your chicken, olives, and Newman's own dressing!"
Her face burned bright red when she spoke, and I could smell the smoke pouring out of her nostrils, most likely from a cigarette she had smoked earlier. I was overjoyed that she asked this, though, because I knew we didn't carry any of this, and I wanted to see her reaction when she stepped into that back fridge. So I maliciously complied and took her to the back fridge and showed her the chicken and other ingredients that we did not have in our fridge. This was against the rules to let a customer into the back of the kitchen, but again I was having too much fun, and what was the worst she could do? I also stated, "The only chicken we have here is chicken of the sea," just really trying to milk the most rage out of her as I could. I kid you not, as I spoke the words, the thermometer in the fridge rose 10 degrees and glowed a brilliant bright red. She stormed out of the fridge, stormed through the kitchen, shoved through the line, and burst through the back door. And as she left, her final words were,
"Now I understand why only men eat here."
I'll admit they were kind of weak last words for the climax of the story, but I'm just telling it how it happened. I was kind of being an asshole, but was really just enjoying myself messing with this lady, and didn't get to do this very often. This happened in the span of about 5 minutes, but it was 5 minutes of ecstasy, and I would pay anything to be able to relive this. 4. From 2008 to 2016, I used to work for a local manufacturing company, primarily did farm equipment and defense contracts. There was a lot of malicious compliance from the employees because this place was a 300-employee company that was family-owned. So, relation was given priority over skill or experience. This meant a lot of stupid orders, and direction was given to people that had been in this profession longer than some of these folks had been alive. My personal favorite happened to me sometime in 2012. I was a second shift lead in the robotic welding department. My responsibility was to do whatever first shift left for us on a hot list, and to ensure first was set up to run in the morning. As they had more employees than I did, this meant I spent most of my night programming and setting up jobs, because they expected me to watch an 8-man crew, with my head stuck under a table in a 15 by 15 foot robot cell. First shift was notorious for keeping knowledge a secret. A lot of their guys were kept as button pushers. Load the part, push a button. If something went wrong, they called one of 3 people to come fix it. On second, I saw this person as well, so I trained my crew to be less reliant on me. This meant my 8-man crew was outproducing First's 12-man crew. We're a team. I got my list done, and First was able to run without issue right away in the morning. That day, First Shift had programmed some new parts for me. They had set up the job and gave my guy and me the green light to run. Our golden rule in robots is always check your parts. You can make junk in a hurry. My guy fires up the job, and lo and behold, the part is out of spec. Dimensions are off, welds are too small. My guy goes to fix the problem when the first shift lead steps in and says, "I programmed that myself, it's fine. I'm tired of you guys wasting time playing with these robots all night." My guy was a bit gobsmacked and questioned the dimensions of the welds. Lead gets in his face and tells him to stop being so picky and run the parts. They have to ship tomorrow. Pause. The first shift guy has been playing this let's screw second shift over game since I got put in charge. I was actually supposed to have his job, but this guy must do some great brown-nosing, 'cause he somehow got to keep it. He's very much a work hard, not smart kind of guy. He sits at his desk and googles random shit all day, so much so they took his desk away but didn't discipline him. I told my guys when he's here we play by his rules, but once he leaves, as long as our work is done, I'll take the hit if he has issues with us. Needless to say, a few meetings were had where I had to defend my guys, won every one of those discussions. So first shift guy was getting salty. On pause. First shift lead leaves, and my guy comes up to me and says, "Too fat. These are all messed up." And the first shift lead says, "Run them." I go look at the situation. He had set us up good. The job was so big that my guys would just be able to finish if they ran at rate for all 10 hours. It would also take an hour to step through the program to fix the welding issues. Not to mention the time needed to shim up the fixture to correct the issues. Doing either of these would mean we played around on the robots all night and didn't run production. Parts wouldn't ship, and my guys would be to blame. So I called up first shift guy and told him I misplaced the hot list he left me, and if he could email it to me. I get an email restating the hot list, but because it was an email and this guy wanted to stick it to us, I knew he'd put a stab in there about these hot parts. Sure enough, in writing, "XXX parts on Robot 1 are set up. First piece was done and signed off. All you need to do is run them." So, it's what we did. I knew they wouldn't ship, and I knew that all 300 of them would have to be cut apart and fixed. Our customer would be pissed, and they would need someone to blame. The look on his face when he dragged me into the front office for not following the golden rule, and I just handed the email over, told the plant supervisor I was told they were good to run. I won many battles with him. He won the war eventually. Kinda. I wanted his job something fierce, I was promised it. But I had to take a week off for an emergency medical situation. When I returned, I was promoted to quality. Come to find out, I apparently had a long talk with the first shift lead while I was out and told him I didn't want to be in robots anymore. Joke's on him, though. I had to sign off on all his parts. There were many nights that I may or may not have had time to do that. I've since left. He's still there, finally was demoted. I hear he's still an absolute utter piece of garbage. But he's the best brown-noser I've ever seen. 5. It has been an interesting week. Why? I am a student who works part-time as a pizza delivery driver on a scooter. Now, I don't work for the restaurant directly, but I work for a contractor, a great boss who pays me on time and is very forgiving, plus an all-round good guy, who employs a bunch of scooter drivers at various restaurants around one of the major cities in the world. And since he's a great guy to work for, I usually eat whatever shit the restaurant workers throw my way with a smile because I don't want to complicate things for him with the restaurant. Enter Dum Dum. There's this idiot who works at the register who I have went out of my way to help in the past, when shutting down the restaurant at the end of a shift. It is known to pretty much everyone that we have exams coming up, and we all need time to study after work, and my shift ends at 10:30 p.m. So the restaurant is about to shut down for the day, and we hear a device beep at 10:29. If Dum Dum accepts the order, I have a 30-minute ride to the location, and then another 30-minute drive to get back to the garage, plus another 15-minute walk to my room. I tell this person that I won't be getting paid for the extra work by my boss, and politely ask this person to talk to the restaurant manager to make sure I get paid for the extra hour of work. And then Dum Dum decided to yell at me.
You don't work for the restaurant. You don't work for the manager. Talk to your boss if you want to get paid.
Let's back up. A couple of days before this idiot yelled at me, Dum Dum has stopped using the words please or thank you, and started giving me orders instead of requests like she used to. And it started getting on my nerves. So after she was done yelling and I had stared at this person in anger, I said, "Okay," and finished my delivery, went back home and fell asleep, after working an extra hour for free, and I was fucking pissed. The very next day I took an order at 10 p.m. It required me to go to like the Bay Area of the city near a harbor. And this place had a lot of confusing flyovers and bridges, and if you made one wrong turn, you were looking to add an extra 30 minutes to your trip. As fate would have it, I was supposed to slide left under a bridge to stick to the streets, but I misread the instructions on Google Maps and took an expressway that took me to another part of the city. My first ever routing mistake while on the job. I was irritated for a few minutes, but then began laughing out loud like a maniac while driving when I looked at the time. 10:30 p.m. As soon as I could find a spot to park, I called the boss and told him I was at another part of the city, and that it would take me another 45 minutes to finish my delivery and get back to the restaurant. And Dum the cashier couldn't leave until I returned all the money I had collected to the register during my shift. And that's when I decided to become the most cautious driver in the world, obeying all the rules of the road that sometimes you treat like guidelines. So anyway, the delivery was eventually done, and I began the trip back to the restaurant, and I started getting calls.
The pizza was too cold and ruined. You're gonna have to take another pizza back to the same address.
And then a call from the boss. I'll handle it, just go back, give them the money, and then go home. I returned to the shop at 11:45 p.m., and Dum was the only one left, and goddamn was this pissant fucking pissed.
Why are you so late? My shift ended 45 minutes ago.
And considering how shitty the place was with paying people, I knew that Dum wasn't getting paid an extra cent after the shift. And I made sure that I spoke softly when I replied. It's like you said. I don't work for the restaurant. I don't work for you. Talk to my boss if you have any complaints. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, number 11. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, I've had an annoying day. I'd ordered a few, well, I've had an annoying weekend, actually. Ordered a few things from Amazon, right? New set of cutlery, because I've been needing cutlery for ages, so found a new set I liked. Should have been there on Friday, it was the same day delivery. Ordered that, didn't arrive on when it was meant to arrive. The weekend goes by, no correspondence at all from them, no updates as to when I might get it. They still have these items listed on their website, and they were still offering them for either same day or next day delivery, depending on when you check the listing. So they've obviously got them in stock, yet still no update. So comes Monday, it's about 8 o'clock, still no message or anything from them, still no package. So I eventually have to contact them, and they're all very apologetic, which is great, but that still doesn't deliver my cutlery to me. And they promise they'll get it out to me as soon as possible, so we'll see when that happens. I had also, somebody had recommended that I try raw honey for a dodgy throat. So I figure, okay, I'll order off Amazon, why the hell not? So I ordered that, and there was some new footwear I'd needed for a while, because the ones I had holes in them, and that's not fun walking with holes in your shoes. So ordered those things together, they both arrived today. Now, I tend to work through the night, sleep through the day, so if a package comes before I've woken up, I've left them instructions that it's to be left in the blue recycling bin, because that's just for paper and cardboard. I don't mind if packages are put in there until I can get to them. I don't even mind if I have to kind of reach in and fish them out if the bin's empty, which it is right now. So I wake up, find the card through the door, right? Now bear in mind they have to leave it in the blue recycling bin because it's a relatively clean bin. And the card says it's been left in big bold letters, the brown bin, which is where all the garden refuse goes. And that is not a clean bin. So the packages were a little bit icky. Not too bad, but still a little bit icky, to the point I had to scrub my hands afterwards. Oh, and one of the packages was open. So thank goodness the honey, that was the package the honey then was open. Thank goodness it was wrapped in plastic. And also sealed inside, so it wasn't damaged in any way, but it's bloody annoying they can't follow simple instructions. Although this is the same company that last year I'd ordered a pack of envelopes from them. They actually just kind of sat them on top of a bin outside in full view for everyone to see. And I'm not even going to go and complain about that because I don't want to piss off the drivers, because if I get the same driver again and they've gotten a bad review from me, well, I might not get my packages. Okay, with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.